Welcome to the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, a weekly broadcast sponsored by CVC Coaching, hosted each week by industry speaker, coach, author, and educator Jerry Eisenhower. Our presentations are produced to assist business owners and managers in turning their business dreams into their business realities. And now, here's your host, Jerry Eisenhower.
And I want to welcome you again here to the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. This is put on and sponsored by CVC Success Group. And we present this podcast to share great ideas with you out there in the world of business. We concentrate with blue-collar home service contractors. That's our main market. And we also concentrate very heavily in the chimney, venting, and fireplace industries. So anyway, today I got another phenomenal and fantastic guest that's going to join me today. And the reason I know that is I had the pleasure of sitting in a conference just last week and met this guy. And one of the hardest things I have as a speaker is to be able to keep my attention and listen to a guy and not get tired of listening to him. And to be honest with you, I didn't get tired of listening to this guy. He had such energy and such a great message that he really got that crowd enthused. And this was at the Warrior Horse Conference last week. And this gentleman's name is Dom, D-O-M, Faussette. And he's a coach, he's a speaker, and he's got some great messages. And I asked him, at a break, it's like, Dom, we got to get to know each other. Will you do a podcast interview with me? And so we came together and we're here today. So Dom, are you out there with me in Arizona today, ready to rock and roll with this thing?
Yes, sir, I am. I'm here. Thank you very much for the invitation to your show. It's an honor. I appreciate that.
Well, it's an honor having you on here, and it's very much a pleasure that you've taken the time to do this, because I can tell already you're a guy that wants to share great things with other people. So let's start out with a couple questions here, Dom. And the first one I've got for you, you speak on how to be the best yourself. In other words, how does a person be their best? Can you expand on this a little bit like you would in a conference? How does a person become the best themselves or best yourself?
Jerry, that's a great question. And I'm prior military. I was Air Force K-9. I'm also an ex-cop. And I thought when I was in law enforcement that I was being my best self. And what I have found in myself and my clients is that staying out of your comfort zone is a way that you get to find out what the best for yourself actually is. So many people, they say, hey, I'm operating at my best self. I'm becoming I am my best self. But then you look at some of their habits and they're not the best habits. So we have to look at every single action we take from the time that we wake up to the time that we go to sleep. And one simple thing or two simple things that I've done with myself over the last couple of years is, one, when my eyes open up, I get out of bed, right? Some of us, our eyes open up and we lay there and we think about the day. I don't know what we think about, but your best self needs you to operate at a higher capacity than you currently are. You got to operate at a high rate of speed more oftentimes than not. So when your eyes open up, for me, if I wake up at 3:15, then I get my butt out of bed at 3:15, because I strongly believe that in that moment, and I don't, whatever your audience believes in, but in that moment for Dom Faussette, I believe God has got something for me. So at 3:15 in the morning, when the environment's real quiet, I'm able to get up and start operating on becoming my best self. The other thing is, I've learned to chunk my day into 3-hour increments. So let's just use 6. I wake up at 6. From 6 to 9, what am I doing to become my best self? So for me, I typically will wake up, have some water, have some tea. I'll read a couple chapters in the Bible. I'll pray, and then I'll head to the gym. That's just those first 3 hours. And as I've chunked my day into 3-hour increments, I can manage that much better than trying to manage an 18-hour period and just flexing to what the world needs for me at that time. So that's how I've learned to operate at my best self. You got to chunk up your day and be intentional every minute of those 3 hours.
I love that, Don. I love the word and the last part you just said about being intentional. I think that's a key word is intentional. It sounds to me like you are a guy that is intent on accomplishing every day what he sets out to do at the beginning of that day. Would that be true?
It's very true. Very, very true. And it helps. So I've heard people say, well, I'm overwhelmed, or I've heard people give advice such as don't bite off more than you can chew. Let's look at the animal kingdom. When a lioness goes out and hunts bison, right? They can't eat the whole bison, right? Or even a lion hunts a bison. They can't eat the whole thing. It's safe to assume that's more than they can chew. They bit off more than they can chew, but they've got a family to feed. They have a pride to take care of. What are you doing for your pride? And you can use that word in both meanings. Pride for self. If you don't have pride in yourself, that means you're staying in the comfort zone. And you're not operating outside of the comfort zone often enough, and you're only biting off enough that you can chew. Now, pride as it relates to your family, maybe to your employees, your team, your department. Yeah, you're the leader. Leadership is influence. You're supposed to take on more than you can chew, right? You're supposed to stay out of your comfort zone. The moment you get comfortable, right? And I've learned this in law enforcement, and I ride sport bikes, and I've learned this on bikes. When you get comfortable, it's time to do something different. So what is the different thing that you're doing that keeps you dialed in on, and I hate to use the word dreams, but let's use dreams or goals or yeah, let's just use dreams or goals. What keeps you dialed in on that? A lot of guys, I don't watch TV. I don't watch a lot of TV, right? And here we are in the football season. So many households spend hours upon hours watching other people chase their dreams, and they won't put in the same amount of effort to chase theirs. And they wonder why they have the same, if you do this, New Year's resolutions year after year after year, year after year. Your goals, if you think about them, most people's goals haven't changed. Why? Because they haven't changed their habits to attain those goals.
Right. And a lot of it, you said earlier, Dom, that one of your morning processes is to read some passages from the Bible. And in this is reading and enlarging in your understanding. You already know what's right and wrong, but by reading and doing this research, does it help you to get that strength you need to go through the day?
It it not well, yes, I'll answer that question, but it not only helps me with the strength from a spiritual standpoint, but I love reading about warriors. And the Bible is filled with warriors that have accomplished great feats and been given great tasks. And they those that complained, they disappeared. And those that didn't complain, like they endured and they created greatness for themselves. Right. And I would love to consider myself a warrior, not specific to the fact that I was in the military, not specific to the fact that I was a cop and kicking in doors, but specific to the fact that I'm very comfortable with who I am. My wife loves me. My children love me, right? I'm okay having a bad day because I know that's just part of the process, right? I think the actions that people take to acknowledge their awesomeness, for lack of better words, that thing that puts a smile on their face, that's a win. And there's so many people out there, and we're talking about warriors. To become a warrior, you have to have a lot of wins, but we don't focus on our quick wins. For some people, getting out of bed is a win, and I need them to acknowledge that, like, that's a win, because somebody didn't get out of bed this morning, whether they didn't, that they're dead, or they're just struck with an illness, and they don't have the luxury of going outside and getting some fresh air.
That's so true. So let me ask you this, Don. In speaking and in coaching, we all develop a point of view. My point of view develops with pain and the pain of change and those kind of things. And what I picked up from you is your point of view often is geared towards the habits of people. What kind of habits are you referring to that can hold a person from going outside of their comfort zone? And what kind of habits do they have to develop to step out of that comfort zone into where it's not so comfortable, but that's where you got to go to get there. So, what are these habits that you seek to change in people?
I was coaching a coach yesterday, and I have a habit assessment that I have clients take, and we'll talk about that later. But what I found was he, as a coach, he expects his clients to meet him where his growth is. And I stated to him that that's unfair to his clients. And the reason this happens is he's successful now. He lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, has a wonderful family, wonderful house. But he didn't start there. His start was, if you can think of any bad thing, like that pretty much happened to him. So his gap between where he came from to where he is now is very large. So his habits have always been push and push and push and push, be pushed by everybody around you, and then push everybody that you come into contact with. And that was his habit. But some of the habits that I see from people, that most of the people that take this assessment, is they lean heavy on the side of pushing towards perfection. And that in itself is detrimental to one's health. It's very detrimental to understanding that's not reality, right? Just because you have, typically people that strive towards perfection, right? Their visions are so far from where they currently are that they drive towards that. But the habits that which is a good habit at times, but on the opposite side of the spectrum, the habits that they're foregoing is that they're disengaged with typically their loved ones. So their wife, their kids, their parents. They're disengaged with the things that matter most. And that habit in itself is going to eliminate one's ability to see life for what it is. And trust me, I get it. I used to be the guy that, I wake up in the morning, 3 in the morning, and I won't go to bed till 11 at night, trying to run a business and still work and be a family man. Like, yes, there's a lot on people's plates, but if you break your day up into 3-hour increments, you'll be able to manage what's on your plate, and you don't have to be everything to everybody. And I think in today's society, especially with speakers and coaches and leaders, and again, leadership is not positional, it's just being a person of influence. We think that we can't fail, or we think that we're not allowed to make mistakes, but we are. So the habit of being robotic, if you will, as opposed to understanding you're a human, is, if you understand that, then I believe you'll live longer. You'll have a better, at least while you're here, you'll have a much better existence.
Got you covered, brother. And you said something there I want to expand on. You just mentioned the word influence. And in your talk last week, you talked heavily about how this is influence is a part of leadership. It's by your influence. So go into some details, if you would, of the who, the what, the why, and the where of influence, and why this is so important in your leadership skills.
Again, leadership being influence. So that means everybody's a leader. Everybody influences whether they like it or not. The question is, what's being said about you when you're not there? And let's go from the home, then we'll go into the business space. How are you perceived, right? Who are you at home? And I share with leaders all the time that if you can't lead on the outside of your home, if you're not first leading on the inside of your home, that's where it starts. Because if you try to be a different person than you are from inside your home, which is typically a natural habitat, is where you're typically, or you should be, very comfortable, and then you try to leave and become somebody else, that's an imbalance to one's influence. So understanding, and I tell people this all the time, don't leave the house looking a mess. Right? We're all in business, whether we work for somebody else or we work for ourselves, everybody's in business. And who are you representing? So I tell my wife and kids when I leave this house, I'm not just representing Dom Faussette, I'm representing the Faussette family. I'm representing my last name. So I don't have the luxury of not looking kept when I leave. And when one goes out looking unkept, there's a lack of preparation. So if there's a lack of preparation at home, then typically there's a lack of preparation in your influence when you get into the workspace, whether you have employees, right? I've heard the phrase, you get under my skin, right? We've all heard that's a very common phrase. Well, if you were operating in the skin that you were designed to be in, then nobody would have the ability to get under it.
Good words. Because that's what coaches do a lot of times. We have to challenge people. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, we do.
Yeah,
Of
that's
course.
part of it because people many times know deep down inside and they have this fear of somebody won't like me. And I don't believe liking has to necessarily be a part of influence. Many times you're going to influence someone and they may not personally like you. Would you agree with that?
Of course. Of
Yeah,
course. I mean, you and I both have friends now that at first didn't like us.
correct.
We're different.
Yep, because you know in your talk last week you laid out some very challenging statements to people, and
Mhm.
you know it's hard to say that. I mean, one of the words you used, and I remember this so well, was were you hiding in the bar? Did you come here to drink or did you come here to learn? That's a challenging statement to make to a group, isn't it?
It is, but the reason why I'm comfortable making that statement is because I live. I'm I'm an example of what that life is, right? And I know as a speaker, we have to build trust with our audience. By the time I made that statement, I had already built trust with the audience. And
You
that statement, and the audience knows that that statement came from a place of concern because we had talked about the family. We had talked about the benefits of growing your business and who that influences and who that impacts, and understanding that we have fears and we have problems and concerns, and sometimes we go to these conferences to escape, but we use alcohol or liquor to escape that when we should be addressing it and speaking to the influencers in the room to grow who we are as people.
Yeah. And when I watched that, it was very neat because you had already heavily influenced people's thinking towards, I feel like they knew you were speaking from the heart and for their best interest when you said that, because that was very near the end. But I very much congratulate you because it takes a lot of strength as a speaker to make those kind of statements. You're kind of putting yourself out there on the edge. Would you agree?
You know, I think in the beginning of, let's call it speakerdom,
Yeah.
it takes strength, but that's who I am naturally. So for me, I don't think it takes strength. I'm very well practiced at what I do. Speaking is it's my, I call it my superpower, but connecting with people truly is my superpower, and understanding that people hurt. And when I'm able to speak outside of myself, so not thinking about whose feelings are going to get hurt, but I'm thinking about the wives. The room was predominantly men, so I'm thinking about the spouses and the kids at home and what they need from their husband, what they need from their father. They don't need them to be excited about going to the bar and look lost and bored in a conference that's going to help them grow their business.
Right. And you know, Dom, this is what I caught on about you, and I hope I've got you pegged right on this, but I think you are a person who wants to influence people's habits. How do these habits that one has form what I'm going to call their sphere of influence? How do the habits influence that?
You know, there's so many things that we do, um, just because it's part of a learned process. Some of the things we do because of our gender. Some of the things we do because of our ethnic background, our race, our religion. And I noticed this years ago in my own life that there are certain things that I did that maybe a woman wouldn't do, and these were habits that we don't even think about why we do them. And I feel that if people were to put thought into every action throughout the day, they'll understand that many of the actions that they take are unnecessary. But I wasn't able to get to this point until I was able to diversify my association. So my sphere of influence in originally was first responders. Most people in that I talked to were prior military or cops. And I had to understand that, okay, how am I limiting myself by only speaking to people that have same life experiences that I am? I'm limiting myself by not engaging other life experiences. So I intentionally, and I encourage people to do this at the conference, I intentionally grew my sphere of influence by people that were more successful than me in business, and it didn't have to be speaking or coaching. I made relationships with people that believed in a different, let's call it religion, or had a different religion than I did. There were people that believed different than I did from a political standpoint, people that just did things that I did not do, but they were still successful in their realm. And learning from their life experience just adds to my bucket of what I call joy. And it allows me to be able to connect with greater audiences. I mean, it's safe to assume that the audience that was there, majority of the people there did not look like me, right? I'm Portuguese, I'm brown, so I'm Portuguese, Puerto Rican, and Antiguan, and I live on the West Coast. I would be considered, and I don't use these phrases, but I would be considered white collar, prior military. Most of the room was not white collar, was not prior military, what wasn't from the West Coast, and didn't share my background. But yet we were all able to connect. The only way that happened was everything that I did 5 years prior to that moment.
Yeah. And you did an excellent job of connecting with those people, Dom. So if a person realizes they have these bad habits, and they even recognize these habits may be holding them back from reaching their potential, from reaching what I call their dreams, how do they work and get over and past and break these bad habits, Dom?
It's the when people think they have bad habits, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I would strongly encourage them to go to domfaussette.com, click on assessment, and take that habit assessment. And many of us have taken countless number of assessments. The reason why I got so dialed in on this one is because I couldn't beat it. And it forced me to answer questions. There's no wrong or right answer, but the results that I got showed me, it showed me the things that I knew, but it also showed me things that I was not aware of. And it's the habits that we're unaware of that typically stop us from growing our business, growing our relationships. And they're so deeply ingrained in us that we think it's just who we are. But it's not who we are, it's who we've chosen to be. And for me, I chose to be a certain way out of ignorance. I didn't know that I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was hurting, whether it's myself internally, externally, or those that I loved around me.
Got you covered, brother. So listen, the people that were in that conference, those were what we're going to call blue collar, not white collar people. Yes, some of them ran businesses, and perhaps they could be white collar, but basically they're in the blue collar work. This is seen as people with dirty fingernails. We're performing services for people in their homes and selling products to them. Do these people's habits affect their performance, Don, even in the world of blue collar?
Of course, of course they do. I mean, if you look at, and I was talking to these guys, and one of the things that came up were they were so focused, and it was a handful of guys that were heavily bearded, and they lost themselves. And I brought this up on stage. I said, you've lost yourself in your beard. You're depending upon where you're located regionally, right? There's certain looks that are accepted. And the question that I asked was, if somebody that looked like you came to your home when your wife and kids were there and you were not, would your family let them in? And I said, if the answer is no, obviously there's nothing wrong with a beard, but maybe being well groomed, not showing up in all black, the habit of not being groomed because you've allowed society to give you a title of blue collar. Wrong. You're not blue collar. You're not white collar. You're a business. You're a person of influence. You don't have to own the business to be a business. When you leave and you knock on that first person's door, and I'm talking about chimney sweeps, and the goal is to get business, and the goal, as somebody mentioned, was to change lives, because obviously not having a clean chimney could cause problems in a family's health. We all know that. And why would you not show up in your best? Why would you show up not representing what excellence looks like? See, some people have become, and this could be regionally, this could be one's ethnic background, this could be one's social status, right? White collar, blue collar, it doesn't matter. Don't get comfortable being who society says you should be. Be comfortable in staying outside of your comfort zone and revamping how society looks at you and what their perceptions of you are.
Dead on the money. Good stuff, brother. So you also said something in this conference that I wholeheartedly agree with. And in fact, one of my coaches I was certified by is Jeffrey Gittimer. His thoughts he has shared before, but it said to move to the highest level, you got to hang out with people who operate at these high levels you want to ascribe to. Can you go into some depth of the explanation on that?
Of course. I think we have to ask we have to break down what is the highest level, like the highest level as a spouse, the highest level financially, the highest level just in internally, because there was a point in time that my goal was to move to the highest level monetarily that I could. And when I got there and I hit the goals that I was wanting to reach monetarily, I didn't focus on any of the other aspects of my life. And then I realized how shallow I was as a man. And then I had to start all over again and not focus so much on my monetary gains, but focus heavily on my health gains, heavily on my spiritual gains, my well-being overall. Right. I used to be a very angry man. It's safe to say now I'm a happy man. You may not always see it on my face because sometimes I'm in thought, but I'm extremely happy day in and day out. So when we think about hanging out with people at a higher level, you have to first ask yourself, what is that higher level that you want to attain? Right? Because it doesn't take a millionaire for you to get in shape. Right? It doesn't take, and the list goes on. We do a lot of comparison and contrast, but you have to understand what are the levels you want to attain. And you can attain more than one level at a time, but the audience has to understand what those levels are. Write them down. And for every one goal that you have, you should also have 2 non-negotiables specific to the levels that you want to reach, because your non-negotiables will force you to remove some of the bad habits.
Can you go further into that word? Because it was a really good one, the word non-negotiables. What does that mean, Dom?
Some people think they're standards, right? And a standard is just something that we hold ourselves to. And I used this example yesterday during a coaching. The standard of my neighborhood is that the trash cans go out on Wednesdays. That's a standard. Well, if Wednesday's a holiday, well, guess what? Trash cans aren't getting picked up, which means that standard changes for the time being. Non-negotiables don't change. So, for example, I know that if I want to have a better relationship with my spouse, 2 of my non-negotiables, when I said this to myself, was when she comes home, no matter, and I can hear pulling in the garage, no matter what I'm doing, I stop what I'm doing and I go greet her at the door, take her bags out of her arms and give her a hug, right? That was a non-negotiable, and it's helped. A non-negotiable that I had in speaking, right, is I pick and choose the stages that I'm going to speak on, no matter how much I'm getting paid. There's just some stages that I won't speak on for whatever my reasons are. That's a non-negotiable. Had I not put that in place, somebody could have offered me $10,000, $20,000 to speak on a stage that a year from now would end up hurting my brand.
Got you covered. I understand completely. So non-negotiables mean, if you're an employer, coming in on time is a non-negotiable factor for your people unless there's a very legitimate reason. Would you agree with that?
I would. So coming in on time could be a standard. The non-negotiable would be, if you're not, I need to get a text. The only way I don't get a text is if you're dead.
Correct. So that's what I mean. So one of the things you talked about last week is the non-negotiables. So you business owners that are listening to this is what you've got to do and establish the accountability that there are certain segments of your business that are non-negotiable. You're going to do the best for your customers. You're going to do the best thing. You're going to work with ethics and with honor, sir, honor and honesty. Would that be non-negotiables, Dom?
Those are non-negotiables. And to even drive that nail deeper, business owners need to do two things. One, understand that they need to appease the customer. It's not your responsibility to appease the employee. If you're paying your employee, you're changing their life, right? Yes, there's some things that as a leader, as a person of influence, your CEO, boss, whatever you call yourself, there's things that you would like to do to appease your employees, but your employees didn't come on board to be appeased. And that conversation should be a non-negotiable. Those critical conversations need to be had at time of hire.
Correct.
Hey, you're here to make money, to put food on your family's table, to keep a roof over their head. I'm running a business. My priority are my clients. You have to make my clients happy. We have to work together to make that happen. These are my expectations of you, and these are my non-negotiables. Is this something that you can do?
Correct. And this is all part of communication. And,
Oh, very much.
that's one of the things that we do a lot in our business. In fact, I did one in Wisconsin yesterday. But and we keep coming up with the leading question that comes out of every SWOT analysis that we do, Dom. What do you think it is?
Leading question.
The leading need for the company based on the employee's input in a SWOT meeting. What's the number one issue?
In my experience, it's employee retention.
It is, but in the employees, this is what we continuously come out. They don't feel that these things are communicated effectively to them. They don't understand the expectations of the company. This comes up at just about every SWOT meeting. So what's business owners, what you've got to do is effectively communicate these non-negotiables to the people that work for you. That's a vastly important thing. You cannot assume that people know this. That you've got to tell them the whys, especially if it is the millennial population. So take these non-negotiables as Dom has explained to you, and make sure your people know this. You can't assume they know it. You've got to communicate it. Would you agree with me, Dom?
Yes, communicate it over and you can't just communicate it once.
No, you have to communicate it over and over and over again. It's just like making a sale. And, sometimes you're going to make a sale on the first contact, but sometimes you're going to have to do follow-up. So you've got to follow up and make sure your team understands what you're doing. This is why meetings, communication, and all is so vastly important, and why we stress as coaches. So here's my last question for you, Dom, and it's really not a direct question, but it's more or less your thoughts. What would you share with our listeners that have sat and listened to us for 30 minutes or so? Tell me how you're going to inspire them to move to what I call the dreams in their life, in business and in their personal life. What words could you give that could inspire them to reach those difficult things, which means they got to come out of the comfort zone at times?
I have found so much value in spending time with self, and I mentioned this during the conference. You break up your life into four quadrants. There's a space for you, right? Then there's a space for your family. There's a space for your business, and then you leave the other space. It could be you could break up the family. Hey, I got space for my kids and a space for my spouse, right? So that's four areas, but I had to learn to forgive those that hurt me. And I had to learn to forgive myself, because so many of us, we've hurt people in the past, or we've been hurt, and we carry that baggage with us, and we try to force happiness, but we don't really know what true happiness is, because we haven't let go of these things. And I would say that to anybody listening is that you've reached perfection. You're good where you are today. Just make sure that you're not there tomorrow, and you can just do one little thing, right? And let's just use working out as an analogy. If you can't do a push-up, but you did 3 push-ups today, and then maybe did 7 tomorrow and then 10 the next day, do you think by the time 30 days came around, you would feel more confident, number one, but you would see a change in how you carry yourself, how you walk, how you talk. You should see a change in how you eat. The little itty bitty actions create so much exponential growth, but we've learned not to focus on our wins. So I would say you're good the way you are for now. Just don't be the same way tomorrow, and acknowledge your wins. Acknowledge the fact that you're alive. If you're listening to this, you're alive. And that means you can make a change. And pick one change. What's one change you're going to do today to make you a better person tomorrow? And it's that simple.
That's some great stuff, Don. Now, what I want you to do is tell people, how do they get in touch with Dom Faussette? And you mentioned about your habit assessment, which actually I went and looked at last week, and I actually had my wife look at this, who's a disc assessor, and she agreed that's a significant value in that assessment. So tell people how to get in touch with you and how to take this. And I presume this assessment is free, so let's let people know that. Go there. So tell them how to get in touch with you and how to do this, Dom.
So the assessment, it was free to the people at the conference.
Okay.
Going forward, it's not. It's the assessment is $97, and you can find it on domfaussette.com. The reason for that is when you take the assessment, then you get time on the phone with me, because I can have anybody take the assessment, but then what? Like, I'm doing them a disservice. So I need them to take the assessment, go to domfaussette.com, look at the assessment. If you don't want to pay for the assessment, that's fine. And you just want some quick little value adds, you can follow me on Instagram. My whole Instagram, Dom Faussette, is very positive, is very educational, if you will. Just like my Facebook page is. I can't accept any more friends on my Facebook page because it's tapped out, but you can go there, or my YouTube channel, which is Dom Faussette. And I think middle of the month, I'm launching a TV show. So all of this will come into one place. But assessment is $97. I've seen guys spend more money on alcohol than developing themselves. And that's why I put a price on it. Because when I see people spend money on cigarettes, spend money on a gym they don't go to, spend money on alcohol, spend money on cable that they shouldn't watch, where they should grow their business, it's such a cheap value, right? The value's high, but the cost is inexpensive to learn about your habits. And I would love to get on the phone and have one-on-one 30 to 45-minute conversation with whoever takes the assessment, because I guarantee you your life would change. At least that's what I've heard from my clients.
Okay, let's give them your website again, Dom, so they get it. Now, you might want to spell your last name. We'll have it in the show notes, but let's get it out, because I want people to be able to reach you if they would like to.
It is Dom, D-O-M as in Mary. Faussette is spelled F as in Frank, A-U, S as in Sam, S as in Sam, E, T as in Tango, T as in Tango, E. So that's domfaussette.com.
Got you covered. Well, Dom, I want to really, number one, again, you were very impressive as a speaker to me. And again, I'm a hard person to impress. Just like as speakers, we watch people. And like I said, I learned things from watching you. And that's what we do as speakers. We do learn from watching other people. But your message was dead on. It was loaded with gold nuggets. And folks, I tell you, if you connect with this guy, I was very impressed. As soon as he got done, I wanted to get to know him and made a connection with him. And this is what you guys got to do, is make connections, because Dom and I have connected, and hopefully it will help him. It will help me down the road by our connecting. You agree, Dom?
I would agree, sir. Definitely.
Okay. So again, thanks for joining us here this week on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. It's sponsored by our CVC Success Group. Check out our educational online learning platform. We'd love to have your participation. But again, this show is put on every week, and the purpose of it is to share solid gold nuggets with you. And I think today we gave you a bag full. So this is Jerry Eisenhower backing out of here, and I look forward to you joining us on future episodes. Let us know if you know of guests to put on or ideas you want us to cover, and reach out to us at CVCSuccessGroup.com if we can help you turn your business dreams into those elusive business realities. Talk to you next time, folks. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for joining us here each week at the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, sponsored by CVC Coaching, providing you the coaching and educational outreach services you need to move to your dream destination in business and in life.